Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Excalibur Roundtable Tech Talk. I am Mike Fuson. This is our special edition of the Excalibur Roundtable Tech Talks, in that we're talking with our Knights of the Round Table. So it is the team that makes up Excalibur and makes us what I think is so very special. I'm joined today by Jonathan Berdyck. Jonathan, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Mike.
All right. So, Jonathan, tell me a little bit about your IT background. You've got a bit of a story there.
Well, I do because I didn't start off in IT, actually, not even close. So, from a formal training perspective, I got my bachelor's degree in something completely different with the idea of joining the professional vertical of what I had chosen to do at that time and didn't really have an eye on anything IT related. I was always technically oriented, creativity, logic, those sorts of things. They were always part of kind of who I was and who I continue to be, but I never really gave any thought to IT. So when I took my first, quote, real professional job, um, for whatever reason, I was immediately recruited into the ranks of IT support and doing kinds of the basic things that you would think about in that space. Desk side support for people having trouble with applications, with just general hardware functionality, things like that. I generally progressed over the time pretty quickly to more broader IT initiatives, networking, application, centralized application delivery, things of that nature. Interestingly enough, I was doing all of this alongside the other, a lot of the work that I used to do. And I got so interested in it, I decided at one point, well, I should just do this for real, and why couldn't I? So I ended up going back to graduate school, and I got a degree that was IT related, and almost immediately after graduation, I got a job with one of the local healthcare providers here in town, and began sort of my career in IT in earnest, doing um, at that point then being responsible for, instead of doing the desk side support and server support, I was accountable for a team of individuals who was doing that at a much larger scale, at an enterprise level. And I never really looked back. I always will continue to have the interests that I started off with as a younger guy. But I always felt completely at home in IT as I progressed into it.
Well, and I know from your background, since we've worked together for probably going on nearly a decade now.
Yeah.
Um, you know, as a customer or as part of Excalibur, but you've got a lot of background as well in helping to develop and document processes.
Yeah. So the how I really got into that was um, I was working for an enterprise that had a pretty wide distributed IT enterprise infrastructure. So lots of different silos, not silos so to speak, but heavily distributed and somewhat isolated. But as the years went on in that role, the enterprise wanted to collapse all of that down. And this is going somewhere. So as we began that, as my team and the individuals as part of the larger enterprise were working to achieve that, eventually we sort of worked ourselves out of the roles that we had. We completed the tasks that were presented to us from an enterprise point of view, and I had to roll into something else to do. Now, these, process improvement, logistics, like logical pathways and sort of figuring things out and how to be more efficient and effective. Those were always things that were of interest to me. So uh, when I was invited to join the larger enterprise service management practice at this organization, I really jumped at it. And so my first role there was to actually help continue the consolidation process of enterprise resources. And that resource at that time was the enterprise help desk or the service desk. So that I was part of the program management for that, taking these distributed units across the organization and working out a plan for how to collapse them down into a consolidated unit, but yet still provide an adequate and effective service model for the parts of the organization that those groups were sourced from. Very interesting work that I didn't actually see the completion of because I eventually left that organization, but very interesting, intriguing work to say the very least. But it gave me a tremendous appreciation for the kinds of enterprise challenges that we struggle with. Even things that we would think would be pretty benign are pretty significant when you're dealing with them on a large scale.
Yeah, and this type of experience is one of the examples that I've given. What I think is part of Excalibur's secret sauce is our team members having walked a mile in a customer's shoes. You haven't spent your entire career being a professional software implementer. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There is certainly knowledge that comes with that. But when you're implementing and you're building these processes and helping customers decide what they need to do, having that experience, having done it, one or multiple times, as many of us have, brings an additional level of capabilities to our customers. And I know from your background, you did that in large healthcare, and you actually did it twice in two large healthcare organizations. And as you've worked, and some of our other team members have kind of a certain extra expertise in some of the nuances that healthcare has to deal with. Because it's not all, many of the same things. We always talk about like incident management, right, as a process, is pretty much done the same way for the most part across most organizations. There's nuances and little differences, but as a process, it's different. Then you roll into things like change management, and it can be night and day different depending upon the industry and level of audit requirements or different regulatory schemas, etc. And so kind of having that experience helps to ask some of the right questions, make sure things are being driven correctly. I think that's something that makes the team at Excalibur a little bit special in bringing that experience to bear. And collectively as a team, because we rely on each other, we may be posed with a situation that we think we know where we want to go with this. Well, we want to get a couple of other opinions. We can reach out to our to the team and get some insight, because somebody probably has been there, done that, has the T-shirt in many cases, and and may give you a little extra insight, things you hadn't thought of, or simply validate that the path you were planning on taking covers the core basis. And let you drive things forward. So it makes it kind of interesting. Now,
and I didn't fall into. I guess I didn't choose healthcare so much as I sort of. I don't know if I would call it falling into it, but it was just ended up being the path that was, one option that was presented to me in particular right out of graduate school, and it was a really attractive one, and then that one. That just compounded itself over a number of years. And I think one of the things that I bring or that I would like to think that I have in many cases now, is a lot of sort of enterprise empathy for what people are struggling with. So a lot of the things in healthcare obviously are very very specific to that industry and the demands around that industry vertical, but there's so many commonalities between the struggles that that different industries have. And me, like so many of my colleagues, and we've all struggled with them directly as part of these organizations.
Absolutely. Now, shifting gears a little bit, we have to do the disclaimer. Jonathan lives about 2 miles from me, so you'll hear eventually, me say a lot of the same things because I'm being bugged now that I need to do one of these interviews and sit in the chair on the other side. But Jonathan, tell us a little bit about where you live.
So my family and I live in the South Hills suburbs of Pittsburgh, and we live here specifically because when we moved here so that I could go to school, this area of town is where my in-laws lived, and at the time, um, my wife and I just had one girl, and she was about 2 or 2.5, somewhere in there. So we needed somebody to help us with childcare, and so my in-laws were a big part of that. So that's why we chose to live where we live. We always kind of thought, well, maybe we'll pick up and move across town or something like that. And well, that never happened. We ended up settling here and really just enjoying what this particular place has to offer. I lived closer to where you live, Mike, in the beginning, and that made getting downtown a heck of a lot easier because there's no real direct route to getting downtown from where we are, other than just cutting through the city streets. So I've always got I've got a good extra 10 minutes or so, maybe 15, depending on the time of day. But we've enjoyed this space, and it's been good for my family and my kids as they've gone through the school district here. And it's been, are there cooler places to live in the country? For sure, but there's so many redeeming qualities about this part of the country and the city that makes it worthwhile for us as a family.
One of the things that as you know, I grew up in Southern California, came out here to go to undergraduate and graduate school at the same place you did your graduate program at, and stayed. Got
Hmm.
married, had kids. Done the whole kit and caboodle. And one of the things I've had friends that have visited, either passing through or coming to a conference that's being hosted here in the Pittsburgh area, and they're always surprised at how green it is.
Mm-hmm.
And where we live actually is one of the tree cities in the nation. We have trees everywhere and massive amounts of green space. And I go back to Southern California, and the weather is nice, um, but it's not as green and lush as it is here. You don't have that. So there's always trade-offs in
Yeah.
everything, but
Well, there's a reason
certainly,
why it's green. It's because I think we get more rain than Seattle. I'm
yeah.
not, I can statistically prove that, but we do. We get, I mean, especially this time of year, when it's supposed to be winter and early spring, but it can't really figure out how to do that. So it just rains. And I think it
Mhm.
has something to do with the geography of the area. It seems like weather patterns just sort of get stuck over us. So then lots of rain, and then we have lots of green. But I love the green. I think I've always been really attracted to. I mean, not that there aren't other beautiful places in the country, but every time I'm in a green space, so to speak, in the country, I always kind of feel at home.
Well, so tell us a little bit about some of your hobbies. I see one of them sitting right behind you.
Yeah, so that would be my electric drum kit. So I guess first it would be probably appropriate to kind of explain, I don't know, maybe be a little bit more philosophical about some of this. So I was told once, John, you really have a lot of hobbies. And I said to myself, thank you, I think. I wasn't sure exactly where that was coming from, but yes, I have a lot of interests that I really think are just simply, and this might sound obvious, but kind of an extension of my personality, right? I love to improve things. I love being creative. I love having adventure, and learning and growing. But I'm also really interested in the arts, and I'm interested in creativity. So yes, this drum kit behind me is part of my sort of personal journey as a musician for kind of most of my life and a percussionist for most of my life. I've had a few sizable chunks of musical hiatus that I think happens for a lot of people that don't aren't music majors in college, but it's one of the things that I think has moved from being a hobby to kind of moving to be a habit in my life, and I do it pretty consistently, which I have, over time sort of accumulated, a number of those things that are just sort of, they're just sort of habits, which are good. So like, I mean, even on a, so, but the arts aren't the only thing. So I kind of have this wide swath of interests, everything from percussion and actually learning more of the piano. And oddly enough, I have a 4-octave marimba sitting in my living room because it was always an instrument that I wanted to learn in high school and college and never got around to it. And now I'm figuring it out and taking lessons. So that's one thing. But I also have sort of a lot of outdoor interests. I love to run. I just generally like being outside, and I make a point of being outside like every day, which working from home actually is a little bit of a challenge because I also tend to be or sourced from kind of the introverted side of things. So I sort of have a tendency, if I don't work at it, to be somewhat of a homebody. So I make a point of being outside every day, going for runs. I probably log 15 or 20 miles a week, around the streets of town here running. And it gives me a lot of really nice feedback, personally, from a kind of a motivation standpoint, from a improvement standpoint. Um, so music, outdoor activities. I participate in a Bible study once a week. I'm trying to make that more of a habit. And so but I really love just being able to witness sort of self-improvement and progress, whether that's kind of, internally to myself or, externally in the world. Those are the kinds of things that give me a lot of joy and give me a lot of nice feedback around, feeling like, my activities are purposeful in life. So it might be a little bit more philosophical about, hobbies, but it's
Well,
sort of where
you
it's
have
all sourced from.
one particular hobby that's somewhat tasty.
Yes, I do some beer brewing, which is decidedly not on the same frequency as my other stuff that's on a weekly or daily basis at this point. And probably that's not a bad thing. But brewing beer at home is also something that I have taken a pretty keen interest in. And if you think about that, it's an art, it's a science, it's logical, there's a process to it, lots of similar qualities, right? And I kind of joke with people that even if I didn't like beer, I would probably brew it because there's just something about the process and trying to improve something every time that's very, very attractive to me. Plus,
Ver-
plus, yes, the outcome is quite tasty.
Hey, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, I appreciate you joining me today and sharing a little bit about the individual that is Jonathan Berdyck.
You're welcome.
So thank you so much. And stay tuned to our audience out there, and you'll get to meet additional Knights of the Round Table as we continue this series. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.